Hello friends, Tanya here with my June 2025 Spellbinders Club Kits 10 card video. It's been an adventure. We've got Shipmates. This is the die of the month or small die of the month, and it has this adorable walrus. You can see all of the great embossing lines on that large piece that will help us with the placement of all of the different elements on this cute walrus. Now you can make this a seal or a walrus. There are two tusks that you can add. This fella also has a shirt and a raincoat or pea coat, however you want to describe that. This is his snout. And I chose to do mine in some dark colors. I think walruses are generally dark. This is one of the tusks, and it's easiest to apply these before you completely adhere them to the walrus, I believe. But that's not how I did it. Of course not. Why would I be smart that way? Once you have the tusks added in there, you can start adding some of the other components. Here is the nose. I chose to keep that the same color as the main body, but you could make it a darker color, or I've seen some people make it kind of a pink color. Next, we have the jacket. Now, later I'll show you another way to construct this, but this is just the simple way that I chose to do this time. And your buttons will then coordinate with the shirt because it's holes through the jacket. You're going to line up the edge of the collar with the edge of the body, and that's probably the best way to line it up. The inside of the collar and the bottom of the jacket with the edges of the critter. Now, there's always more than one right way to assemble these. You could also assemble the clothing on the bottom portion of this walrus before you put the snout on. That might be an easier way. I kept having to tuck the edge of the collar under the snout. Next, I chose to put the little toque on his head, or the little stocking cap. I think that's adorable, honestly. And then there are these great swirly whiskers. These are really cleverly designed to create that full whiskery look with only one piece for each side. I love how they constructed these. And there are embossing lines on the snout to help you figure out where to put them for the most picturesque look. There really is no right or wrong way to assemble this walrus. You go ahead and use your imagination. And he also has a pipe. I think this is so stinking cute. Again, not a perfect place to put him. Put that pipe. You can put it in a variety of spots, whatever will work the best for the design of the project that you're creating. Next up, we have this seagull, and there are two different leg formations that you can do. One where he would be squatting and one where he's standing. Squatting or flying, I suppose, with the feet tucked up against the body. There are little pieces to add to the tips of the wings to add a contrasting color. You could just ink blend on the ends of the wings if you wanted, but it's really easy to add these wing tips with the die cuts. There are some adorable accessories for this little seagull. Here is his little sailor's cap, and there is a scarf or a neckerchief that he wears. There's also this cute little flag, which there are lots of mariners signs or flags that you can mimic if you wanted, but I just chose to do some ink blending on our flag. I'm also going to glue our flag right to his wing like he's signaling to another ship. Here are the two different configurations for the feet or legs. I love that they added these, and I did see someone else glue the feet directly to the legs to add a little more dimension. That was a pretty clever idea too. And those are the cute critters from the die of the month from this month. Next up, we have the large die of the month called Sailor's Light, and it is chock full of images. There are 3 buildings. 2 are like houses, and one is a lighthouse. They're very easy to assemble. There's a backer with the roof. And if you wanted to get fancy, you could cut that backer from white cardstock and use Copic markers or whatever to color them so that you'd have different colors through the windows than you do than the roof is. And there are window frames that you can add in the window holes. And they actually fit over these just perfectly. It's not real difficult to line these up at all. I just added little dots of glue behind each of these before I laid them over the windows. Next is the taller portion with a little chimney on it. This looks most like a house, and you can build these together to create different structures. I'm adding the outline, or sorry, the front piece, and there is actually a separate roof piece for this one. You could even color that chimney a different color. You can go very detailed with these, lots of color. You can do just a silhouette without adding the extra details on these pieces. Or you can go very minimal with the white and black and gray that I've done here. The reason I chose those colors is I had no idea what I was going to do with these images when I did my cards, so sometimes it's fun to have some very neutral things to work with. The not oval, the arched windows are the same on all three of the buildings. There is a round window just for this house, and there are two different styles of doors. There are again embossed lines on these pieces that help you line up the different pieces. The door for the lighthouse has an arched shape to it, and as you can see there, you can layer those pieces together to create a house or a colony of homes or a town or a village. The lighthouse assembles very similar. Just line up the embossed lines with your overlaying pieces, and you can add different colors in all the different areas if you chose. There is the same oval window frame. For both of these pieces, the die that cuts out that oval window, or not oval, arched window, cuts out two windows at a time. So if you're doing all three of these buildings, you would run that through the die cut machine 3 times to have all of the window frames you needed. These are the stripes for the lighthouse, and those again have embossed lines that help you place those. Trying to give you a good close-up there. And we'll just line these up. And these are 2 different sizes, these stripes, because the lighthouse widened as it goes down very slightly. Just little dots of glue are all you need. This assembles pretty easily. I did find by holding my fingers on the edges of the lighthouse, it was easy to line these stripes up so that they're even with the edges of the image. And then we have the arched door that slips right into this opening on the lighthouse. This lighthouse goes together so quick and easy. I have a few different lighthouse dies, and this was the easiest to assemble I've seen yet. We've got this great catwalk or balcony up at the top of the lighthouse. And I'm just using the tip of my tweezer to get rid of some of those paper hairs that we always end up with. Next, we're going to add the flags to our different buildings here. They are so cute together. I am really impressed with the design of the large die of the month this month. I think I used multiple components from multiple different sets all through these designs, and I am often surprised at which ones I use the most. So there's 2 different flags here. There's a short dovetailed one and a long one. That top one looks more like a windsock. We all know I work in a hospital, and both of the hospitals that I work at, there's a windsock that I think probably helps, maybe, or helped, I don't know, with the flights when they have to, the helicopters when they have to stop or land on our helipads. It just shows them the direction that the wind is blowing. That's my guess. Next, we have a couple of mountains or hills that come in that large die of the month, and they both have snow caps that you can attach. I die cut these again with some neutral tones. I've got some white cardstock and some craft cardstock here, some dark craft cardstock. And those assemble very easily. We also have this beautiful 2-layer cloud. I die cut that both layers with white, and you could just use the main large. Well, actually, you could use these independently, but I did layer them together. I think they are very beautiful layered together. The detail portion is a die that you drop into the main body die so that it matches actually just perfect together. Really beautiful. There are also 3 rocks or boulders, and these are layered also so that you have two-toned rocks to add to your scene. This is so cute. And it's a little whimsical, but it's not so whimsical that you wouldn't think it could go on adult cards. I think it's really, really cute. That's 2. There are 3 sizes of rocks, small, medium, and large. And these are really easy to assemble. Just layer them together with 2 different colors. You could even do the same color and just do a little ink blending to get a little definition, but they're really easier with just 2 different colors. Then we have a landing spot or an island for them to sit on. And here I'm just laying the rocks on there. And we also have this beautiful curvy wave, which you can use singularly or in multiples to create a beautiful ocean. This piece is the solid piece that fits behind this wave. These are 2 separate dies. There is not a drop-in die for this one. The bottom edge of the detailed die lines up with the bottom edge of the larger die, and that is the beautiful scene you can create with the large die of the month. What am I adding there? Oh, there's this cute banner, which someone else showed us that you can layer those 2 layers of banner together and it creates alternating colored banner. This is the stitching die of the month. It's called Ahoy Matey, and it has lots of awesome, this is a really big die set, this stitching die of the month. This particular piece that I'm assembling is the scarf. There's a scarf in this one. And I did 2 layers of cardstock just to make it a little more sturdy. And this is very simple stitching, just up and down to create lines in the scarf. I am using a similarly colored blue thread, and I am tying it in the back. You could use tape to secure it, but this is a pretty small image, so a small knot is probably going to be your best bet. Just up and down through these different holes to create the texture on our scarf. Now I do show you the stitching for the whole scarf. I don't know why I didn't cut it short, but that's okay. If you have looked at the length of this video, you know it is almost 2 hours long. There is a lot packed into this video, and I had a great time putting it together. It wasn't from a lack of ideas. In fact, I squeak in 1 extra card in this video, and I was not thinking I was going to be all that excited to create with this month's theme, because in my head, I am not a whimsical character kind of person. But this is tickling all of my nature and nautical and masculine themed itches. And I was able to pull a lot of different looks together with these dies and stamps and betterpress and glimmering. Yeah, so much fun. Now, one of the ways I like to add a little extra pizzazz to a really simple stitch design is to outline the element with more stitching. And that's what I did with this scarf. I don't think I actually used this scarf in any of my projects. I could have though, man. Upcoming. See, I made a grid of stitching all the way across that particular scarf. This is the waves that are also stitchable, and this version I am just doing the same up and down. I did this design, or I die cut this design twice on this piece of blue cardstock because I wanted to show more than one way to stitch this. There are lots of ways to do it. This is the simplest of them. I do believe I did stitch an outline above and below the wave also, just because I like that extra detail. Yes, it takes a little more time, but I think the beauty is in the details. So sometimes it's worth it to put in that extra time. That is the second version. That's the first version. So this other one, I just crisscrossed the waves, and I think that turned out so cool. And I also used a variegated thread to do the stitching there. Now, when I did the stitching on the steering wheel for the ship, I did do crosses or X's on my stitching also instead of just up and down, which is what most of most of the stitching I have seen has been the up and down, but you know me, I just got to be a little bit extra. And I did X's on mine and then outlined them. And that's the finished wheel. I think that turned out really well. Also in the stitching die of the month, you get another seagull. This one is a little larger than the first one and also has these very easy to assemble wings with the gray tips. I'm doing the tips of the seagull's wings here. And when I am assembling the different elements, I am always trying to remove the paper hairs before they become a part of our permanent project. I like to use the tip of my pokey tool to do that. I was giving you a close-up of the embossed details. Now watch me assemble this incorrectly. That is, if you're going to give him his shirt. You can assemble this fellow without the clothing too. So that's how you would assemble this seagull if you weren't going to put any clothing on it. There is this really cute captain's hat and a striped shirt that you can add, and that is the clever way that you put the two legs onto the back of your seagull. I love that the die cuts both legs connected. That is such a game changer for me. Next, we're going to put the two pieces together to create the striped shirt, and I just chose a couple of reds here. Just making sure that I get the stripes lined up appropriately. And now we're going to try to assemble that on our seagull. Yeah, I have to pull the wing up so I can slip that shirt in where it belongs. Next, we're going to add the white to the cap here. This captain's hat is two pieces, and honestly, you can add a third color in that hole where there would be an emblem on the front of the cap. Just by die cutting another color with that same piece. There's also a little string necktie that you can add to your little seagull if you don't want to use the scarf. There's also an anchor and a sentiment that says ahoy, and we have these beautiful waves. See what I mean? This was just a jam-packed die set. Next, the Caboodle Extra is the set sail die. So if you are a deluxe Caboodle member, this is the die you get extra. I decided to go rainbow because why not? And it is Pride Month. So I always like to incorporate extra rainbows during my June kit, just to show support to the LGBTQ community. There are so many people in my life who are members of that community, and I love them all very much and feel that it's important for me to show my support. I just used some Copic markers to add color to this sail, and I think that turned out pretty cool. I do show you the colors later because I do use this on a project. I cut the main body of the sailboat from craft cardstock. I believe this is Desert Storm craft cardstock. I also colored the stripe die with the same colors, and I'm adding that to the white backer for that sail. You do not have to be this complicated with this sailboat. I just was being extra as usual. Adding that second layer right on top of that main body. This was a very well thought out die set, so you can add colors very easily and actually very quickly if you decide not to color them. Just die cut them out of different colors of cardstock and assemble, and you have an instant, very cute sailboat. Just lining the bottom edge of that, and then we'll add the top bar. I did choose to make that craft colored also, keeping all the color for the sails and the flag at the top of our cute little sailboat. There is our assembled sailboat. Just getting rid of more paper hairs. What a cute sailboat. Next, we have the Glimmer of the Month. This one is called Castaway, and it has this netting design to it. I'm going to, of course, foil this twice on a piece of craft cardstock, and I'm using my favorite foil to use on craft cardstock, and that is the blush foil. The rose gold would look amazing also. Just going to secure my plate to this 5.5 by 8.5 inch piece of cardstock with a piece of Best Ever craft tape, lining that up after I'd created the hinge with the tape, and then we'll flip that back down Lay it on my platform to heat up, and once that's hot, I'll run it through the die cut machine. We'll pop that off of our piece of cardstock, and look at that. It is gorgeous. Now to get my second foiling, this is not a repeatable design, so I'm just going to line that up as close as I can and put another piece of foil down. I created my hinge again, and we'll make sure that foil is to the edge of the previous foiled image. It won't foil where you don't put foil underneath the plate, so if you needed to shorten this, you sure could. Going to run that through again after I've let that plate heat up nice and hot, and that is our second foiling. We also have a couple of sentiments. Actually, this is the Harbor Weave Better Press of the month. I like to take all of the sentiments from the Better Press and the Glimmer of the month and foil them all at the same time if I'm going to do foiling with all of the sentiments. Now, I typically take multiple colors of foil and multiple colors of cardstock, usually white, craft, and black, and then I foil them in various golds, silvers, white, and then I do use the opaque black and foil that on the white cardstock. Now I do have a piece of copy paper underneath the plates on the platform, and that helps me line up my cardstock that I'm going to foil on over and over again. That way I don't have to tape my sentiments down. I can just leave them on the platform and keep foiling. Now this is the Better Press of the Month plate, and I took and used a Sharpie to mark where the rope edges are so that this repeating pattern, and it is repeating top and bottom, you can repeat this in either direction. So I'm laying this on a piece of white cardstock. I have some satin metallic rose gold, I think that's what this is, foil here. And we'll heat that up on the platform, run it through the machine, and this is what we get. I probably could have heated this up one more time because it's not as crisp as it could be, because this satin metallic is not always the best in its transferring. It really likes the platform and the plate to be really hot. So in those cases, I tend to let it heat up, set the timer, pull it out, slide it right back in. And see, I'm showing you how that lines up with those black marks that I've created. And you're going to see how close this comes. It's not perfect, but darn close. Anyway, I like to heat it up, set the timer, pull it out, slide it right back in, let it heat up to a green light, and set the timer again before I actually foil with it. And that tends to give me a better foiling. There is my second foiling, and it did match up pretty well. Next, we're going to use this as a Better Press plate, and I have this lined up with the center line on here, and we're going to Better Press another large piece because I like to do larger format. I like to do things, I like to see if I can push my supplies to be able to be used for the larger format. These plates are formatted for A2 size, so they're usually about 4.5 inches by 5 3/4, so that it's just a little bit bigger than an A2 panel, so that you can cut that down and have your full coverage of the image or the design. I'm using some different colors of VersaFine Clair ink, and now I'm looking through the side to see if this matches up with the previous printed area. Just very carefully adjusting that. It is already inked up, so I'm trying not to get ink all over my fingers. But you can see that I'm peeking to make sure that this lines up pretty well. Now there was still a gap when all is said and done, so yeah, I could have done a better job, but it's pretty close. Definitely usable. Next, we're going to use the stencil of the month, Rolling Tide, and there are 3 designs in this stencil set. We've got these beautiful swirling winds or waves, however you want to use these. I have a half sheet of cardstock here that I'm lining up. I have it on my 9x12 sticky mat using a clear piece of acrylic here, or packaging sheet, to cover the area I don't want to stencil. I've got Uncharted Mariner broken china, and salvaged patina that are distress inks. These are not oxides. And I don't know if I told you I think it was last month, I decided I was going to re-ink all of my ink pads. Yeah, that was like a 2-day event. I'm telling you, I have that when you have lots of ink pads, the downside is maintaining them takes a lot of time when you decide that it's finally time. And I did really need to re-ink my ink pads. See how easy that was to do when your ink pads are nice and juicy? It goes very quickly. If you're having troubles doing your ink blending, you likely need more ink in your ink pads. Next, we're going to use this bubbly design, which I think is adorable. It is, for as unenthused as I thought I was going to be about this bunch of this club's kits, these are really fun. I had so much fun. Sometimes you just got to start playing with things and you'll discover that you like them, easy for me to say, right? Even though you didn't initially think they were going to be all that fun to play with. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of ocean themed products in my stash, and these will coordinate with so many different things. This bubbly ocean is so cute. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine using this inside of a glass die? Like the wine bottle that we got long ago, inside of any of our drink glasses. That's just, bubbling cauldrons. So many cool ways to use this stencil. I love it. Can't wait to play with it some more. I suspect that this one will sell out. So if you do not get the club kits and you're watching this and you're trying to decide if you're going to pick up any of them, this is one that I would get. This is a really versatile stencil and can work with more than just ocean themed things. Now, I could have used separate A2 sized pieces of cardstock, but I decided to go ahead and just use the same piece of cardstock to do both of these patterns. Now, I flipped my whole mat so that I could have this pattern be on the bottom, and it's just easier for me to stencil from the bottom up. This stencil just creates multiple colors of waves or a curvy design. Again, would not have to be ocean themed. Could just be a funky, curvy lined pattern. I'm going to line this up so there's a very slight overlap onto the previous curve here. And we'll use our next tone of blue. And again, you could use whatever colors you want. I've seen some really creative ways that this stencil set was used. And the third layer for the topmost curve, just using my sticky mat to hold that in place, and of course using that piece of packaging to cover the other half of the cardstock so I don't get any ink where I don't want it. I did try to clean the stencil between uses or between each inking, but I did ultimately take them to the sink and clean them. Now, the best way to get your paper off of the sticky mat is to roll the sticky mat away from the paper so it doesn't curl your paper. Next up, we have the clear stamp and die of the month. This is Anchors Away. There are 16 clear stamps and I believe 14 dies. There are so many great ocean and mariner themed sentiments on this set. We're also going to use the Harbor Weave die to cut out the pieces and the die from the Glimmer of the Month Castaway also. So one is narrower and one is wider, and these work really well to die cut the 1 and 2 line sentiments. Finally, on to card number 1. We're going to start out with that bubbling liquid stencil. I used the Salvage Patina with that, and we're going to take a little bit of that ink, use some water, and I smushed it onto that piece of acrylic card or just clear acetate. We're also going to use some of the Yasimoto and Spellbinders watercolor mixing set. This is the pearlescent version. I added some water and we're mixing that up to get it to the right consistency to spatter. I've already spattered some of the salvage patina onto this background, just adding some spatter on the whole panel here. Just want to add some extra interest to that white area above it. I have a hard time with blank white space. I really do. We're also going to use the Arch Labels and Tag die set. This has been out for a while, probably about a year, and I'm going to figure out which size die I want to use. I am using the first and the second dies here to create a matted panel. I'm also going to use the 5x7 Matting Basics Set B. Set A gets some play this time, by the way. Mariner's Weave Embossing Folder of the Month is what we're going to use to create texture on that panel for the background of our card. This is, of course, going to be a 5x7 card. I brought out my Pearl Luster Gilding Polish, and we're going to add some shimmer and shine to that weaved pattern that we embossed into this panel. Just using a light touch to cover this entire raised portions of this panel. I love the way the Pearl Luster adds a lovely sheen. You could certainly do this with any of the solar pastes or any of the other pastes out there that create that beautiful metallic shimmer. I did add a little extra cardstock behind that panel to make that a little more sturdy before I adhered it to the card base. Next, we're going to use that Ahoy Matey Stitch die of the month. We're going to use some components from this die set and the Anchors Away Clear Stampin' die of the month. We've got our really adorable seagull, the steering wheel, ship wheel, and an anchor. We also have that Ahoy Matey sentiment that we're going to add. So I took this panel and adhered it to a 5x7 white card base, using my Misty to add a little extra weight so that it adheres nicely. We also have our different ovals that were not ovals, those little bit wonky arches. We're going to assemble those together before we adhere them to the card front, just making sure that I have pretty even margins all the way around this arch. Adding a little bit of I added some extra cardstock, of course, between each of these layers. Now we're going to roughly center this on our card front. These arches work really well with both A2 size and with 5x7 card bases. I also put, I think 2 or 3 layers. This is a pretty lightweight cardstock that I found in my stash of a dark craft cardstock. And I think it took 3 layers to get a good solid anchor put together. I added extra cardstock behind the seagull so he would be flush with the steering wheel, and added him on top of it. I saw lots of people do that on their cards, but it's just like a natural place for him to be. So why fight it, right? Now this is a great example of not using any stitching on the stitching dies. You don't have to use stitching. It works great without it too. And we are adding some extra layers behind the Ahoy Matey before I adhere that to the steering wheel. And one final touch on the front of the card, we're going to add this anchor just leaning against the steering wheel. Would that be a natural place for that to be? No, not really, but I like that it ties in with our design here. Now inside the card, I am going to do a little bit of spattering using the same elements. I did use a little bit of salvage patina, which, because this is an afterthought, I didn't use the same squishing of it. I squished it onto the lid of my watercolor palette here, which is just as good. It's a non-porous surface that's easy to clean back up. Next, I took a piece of copy paper and, oh, what am I doing here? I am going to stamp, a sentiment. I'm going to stamp a sentiment. This one says, "Party like a sea captain. Happy birthday." I love that sentiment. That's pretty fun. That's like adult whimsical. We'll stamp that down using the Stamp Wheel 2.0, which has that wonderful feature where you can take one side off, so it's an open-sided stamp positioning tool. Next, I'm going to take a piece of copy paper, die cut a large arch out of that and use that as a mask on the inside of the card. I'm using that bubbling wave stencil, and we'll do the same colors that we did on the front of the card with Salvage Patina, Broken China, and Uncharted Mariner. I also add some color to the top portion of that masked area, and I'm using different portions of, or covering different areas of the stencil with some Best Ever Craft tape too, to make sure I don't accidentally get ink where I don't want it. Just carefully tacking this stencil down for each layer of stenciling. Now the cardstock I'm using is a very heavy weight. This is at least a 100-pound white cardstock that I'm using for the base, so it does very well with all of this extra ink from the stenciling. I think that turned out really cool and would work as the front of a card too. So that's card number 1. Card number 2, we're going to use the Harbor Weave Better Press of the Month. I have some cardstock or watercolor cardstock that I use some Concord 9th Mushroom Liquid Watercolor. This was something I had done a while back, just playing with those liquid watercolors. And now we're going to use the Charcoal Gold Lisa Horton Metallic Interference inks here. Now I'm using a light hand because this is a spongy ink pad. So you don't want to put too much ink or you'll get it everywhere on your design. Now, this was a much more forgiving way to do the two different inkings. What I did here is mark the outermost lines on the sides and the center point, making sure I'm lining those up again on the bottom. You can't see that. There we go. Yep, I'm making sure those are lined up. And then I'm going to ink this again and run it through, and it actually lines up darn near spot on perfect. Sometimes you just have to get a little creative with your markings so you can do your repetitive better pressing. I am going to do this one more time, lining that up so I can mark these edges on the top side or the image side of the plate so I can do this easily the next time I want to do that. Next, we're going to use the Walrus from Shipmates, and we're going to use that Arches die again and the 5x7 Matting Basics Set B. I'm going to die cut a panel from the better pressed portion. I love that brown. It really turned out good. We're going to use the Arch Labels and Tag, and I'm just going to try to figure out what size works best behind our walrus. Now this was a natural pick. This shape really matches the shape of your walrus. I'm also using the 3D embossing folder of the month, Nautical Knots. This is a gorgeous embossing folder. Love it. If you're looking for some sea themed or masculine or yeah, if you're looking for that kind of theme, then this is a perfect embossing folder. I would grab this. It actually works pretty good for kind of a knit look too, like a cable knit sweater look. I mean, it's not exactly cable knit, but it gives that feeling. So if you're looking for a large sized embossing folder for that look, that would work too. We're also going to use the Anchors Away Clear Stamp and Die of the month, and as you can see, I'm using my quick and easy method to organize those. We're going to take a piece of craft cardstock and emboss that with the Nautical Knots embossing folder and use the Charcoal Gold Interference ink pad and just run that very lightly over this the raised parts. And I re-inked this ink pad too. Like I said, I did a lot of re-inking. My ink pads really needed it. Winter is over. The super, super dry humidity is over. It's time to add a little more moisture to those ink pads, at least for me. I have a 5x7 card base here out of 100-pound Desert Storm cardstock. I cut that to 7 by 10 inches and scored at 5 inches. And that creates my 5x7 card base. I'm using my T-square ruler here to try to make sure that I have a nice straight line here for this little border. I do like to leave like a 1/8 of an inch or a 1/4 inch gap between the edge of the cardstock base and the edge of any of these lines of design that I put on the inside. We're also going to stamp directly inside the card base with some sentiments from Anchors Away and that cute little anchor that comes in this stamp set. Just using some VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink to add that sentiment. And do I stamp it twice? I can't remember. No, I don't think so. I'm just cleaning these quick before I put them back on their backer sheet. This is absolutely how I craft. My stuff gets put right back away. Otherwise, it would be lost because, yeah, there's way too many things that it could hide under or get mixed in with if I didn't put things away right away. How do you craft? I'm a messy crafter, but do you keep things pretty organized for fear of losing them? I have adhered that watercolor and better pressed panel to the card front. I did put an extra layer of cardstock behind that panel. I think. Maybe I didn't. No, I didn't with the watercolor cardstock. It wasn't warped, and it's a pretty heavy cardstock to begin with. So this particular one, I did not add extra cardstock behind. But the arches I did, and I did put extra cardstock behind our walrus. Extra layers of cardstock behind our main sentiment also help make that stand out, especially if you have a busy background. So adding a couple extra layers of cardstock can really make a big difference in how easy it is to read your sentiment if you're having troubles with that. We're going to put our sentiment down on the card front just to help with placement before I put our arch down. And I'll add my heavyweight block here to help that adhere, especially with all of the texture. We'll center the sentiment below the arch so that the spacing between the bottom of the sentiment and the top of the arch and the edges of the card base are about the same. We'll add our walrus on the front of our card. And I'm going to line the bottom edge of the walrus up with the bottom edge of the white arch. Next, I'm going to take some of these smoky topaz color essential gems. I'm not sure if this color is still available, but I really love this color. You wouldn't tell by, well, there's a lot of gems on these. I always thought that there weren't enough on here to justify buying them, but there really are. I've made several projects with each of these packages, even though there's one sheet of gems. Look at all those. I bet you I can get 10, 20 card projects out of one of those packets. That's a lot. And I don't skimp on them. All right, that was card number 2. Card number 3, we're going to use this gorgeous sailboat that we created earlier. We're also going to use the Anchors Away Stampin' Die of the Month. There is our Set Sail Caboodle Extra. I've seen lots of people doing very just easy color blocking with those. We're going to use the Wave and the Cloud from Sailor's Light, the large die of the month. And these are the colors of Copic markers that I used, if you want to write those down, if you really love those colors. And I have those colors again. I'm going to take this piece of scrap cardstock. This is a scrap from making 5x7 card bases. So this is 100-pound cardstock, which gives it a little extra heft. I have that wave there, the back of a wave, laying next to it so I can get a rough feel of how long I need to make this rainbow panel, because I'm making a rainbow wave. Because if we're going to go rainbow, we may as well go all out, right? Now I do have to repeat the colors a couple times here, almost all the way back around. And I will use the detail portion of the wave to die cut this rainbow inked panel that I've created. And that does line up on there perfectly. So I'll just use a piece of low-tack tape, the Best Ever Craft tape, and I'm going to run it through my Scout here. That Scout gets lots of work, let me tell you. If you don't have a Scout and you wish you had a tabletop or just a small die cutting machine, this one is like the best of all worlds, I'm telling you. Next, we have some new treasured cardstocks. There is this antique assortment. There is a aquamarine, I think, red and black or charcoal. I can't remember what they call it, but gorgeous. I am so excited to have more colors of the treasured cardstock. Yes, 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 yes. I'm creating some white glitter cardstock backer for the wave here. Just trimmed that down so I can use the Scout to cut that out again. Just going to back that wave with the glitter. We'll just use a little bit of glue here. This is, of course, Bearly Art Precision Glue in a fine tip bottle. Both of those are available through Spellbinders. I love this fine tip glue bottle. I just keep refilling it with Bearly Art glue because, well, Bearly Art glue is a really good glue. It has good hold. It doesn't show through on the backs of your cardstock. It doesn't leave a wet warp. It sets fast, and it's very easy to do a very fine line of gluing. And it doesn't set off my asthma, which is always a struggle. When I find a good glue, man, I'm going to stick with it. I have assembled a second wave here. This is going to go on the inside of the card. The glittery one is going to go on the outside of the card. Just playing with how I would have my sailboat sit on this cute little wave. I did grab another piece of white cardstock and die cut the backer for the sailboat from this just to add a little extra stability. The sails are connected to the boat with just that thin strip of cardstock, which can be easily bent. So adding that, and I'm using the tip of my tweezer to make sure any glue that was squeezing out doesn't create a funky edge there. Now we're going to decide what color cardstock we're going to use, and I'm using my, oh gosh, my swatching there to pick, and I'm going to use Seaside, and I pulled out these scallop and stitched oval dies and the 5x7 matting basics, of course, and I'm going to use the nautical knots again with some white cardstock to create our background for this. I cut the oval from some Seaside cardstock, which, oh, that stuff is delicious. That cardstock is amazing. I also had stamped and embossed the sentiments all in gold foiling. Now I did do the stamping with the VersaFine Clair ink, Nocturne ink, the black ink, and then did the embossing with gold embossing powder. And you cannot tell that it's black behind that gold embossing, but you can see where you stamped. That is one of my favorite tips about embossing, that you can, if you're doing a opaque embossing powder, you can use a VersaFine Clair ink and do your stamping, and then whatever color embossing powder is what you use over the top, and that's what color will show. Now I have layered extra layers of cardstock behind each of these pieces and added them to a 5x7 white card base. And it's time to start adding all of the fun. I'm just kind of toying with placement here, finalizing that. And I did cover all of those pieces with my acrylic block so they wouldn't get spattered with this Yasumoto and Spellbinders watercolor mixing palette. And I did pull out the white spatter from Spellbinders, and I added a little water to what was in the lid. Now I would not do that again in the future because it made a big fat mess. So don't try to use your lid as the mixing area. Just use another non-porous surface. Spattered that, and I'm going to spatter a bit on the inside because that's a fun and easy way to add elements from the front of the card to the inside of the card. And then we're going to glue our pieces to the inside of the card first. If I have that planned, I like to do the inside of the card first. I adhered my not glittery wave to the inside, and the sentiment seize the day and make it amazing. And now we'll finish assembling the front of the card. So I have my wave with the glittered background. and my sentiment that says ahoy matey, and I'm using other elements like the cloud and the sentiment to make sure I have my spacing good on this oval. This kind of gives us a window look or a framed look to our image, our main components. And by having them overhang the edges of the oval, it really brings the design into a cohesive piece. Next, we're going to use the Crystal Mix gems here, and I'm using the more iridescent, not the cloudy looking ones, and I'm adding a fun smattering of these across the front of our card front. I was going to do just 3 gems on each side of the sailboat, but I end up doing 4. And little secret here, I forgot to adhere that sentiment. So it's kind of sticking to the spatter at the moment. After I finish the filming and I pick up the card to move it, I realize that it's not actually glued down. So can you believe it just stuck to the spatter that long? All right, card number 4. We're going to use that Rolling Tide stencil of the month again. We're also going to use a couple of sentiments from the Anchors Away. I use this stamp set practically for every single card in this video. We're also going to take the mountains or hills and the wave that I assembled at the beginning from the Sailor's Light large die of the month, and we're going to use the Perfect Touch arches to do the backdrop of our main image here. I'm going to use also the Perfect Touch rectangles and create my one and only A2 size card in this grouping. So I have a white A2 size card base. I did cut down that stenciled piece with the Perfect Touch rectangles, and I'm going to adhere that to the card front with extra cardstock behind each of our layers to add extra depth and dimension and a little extra sturdiness. Just using the tip of my pokey tool here to knock off any of the paper hairs. I am very careful about making sure I don't have paper hairs because I think it takes away from the look of my cards. Your cards, it might not be such a thing, but my cards it is. At least in my brain, we got to do what makes our little crafty souls happy. I'm lining up my sentiment and my wave and my hills by doing a little dry fitting. I can make sure that I get things where I want them. Trying to do even spacing with the sentiment, which I die cut with I think this is the Better Press of the Month die for that long rectangle for the sentiment. And I am centering next the hills in our Perfect Touch arch. And last, I added a little bit of extra cardstock on the bottom edge of the curve of the wave to make it nice and flush with the hills or mountains. The sentiment I chose is from where the cliffs meet the sea. And then we're going to take that same stencil that is used on the front of the card and add that to the inside of the card using the same colors. I just left those ink pads out on my work surface for most of the time I spent creating because it just was a perfect trio of colors for this theme. Again, it's Salvage Patino, Broken China, and Uncharted Mariner. I'm just going to try to lightly ink blend this on the inside of the card. Again, bringing the design from the outside of the card to the inside of the card in a very easy fashion. I'm trying to keep the edges of the stenciled area very soft and so that they just kind of fade off, which creates kind of that vignette appearance. Sometimes when I'm trying to peel my tape back, I use the tip of my pokey tool to get it started. Now, when I was pulling this paper tape back, it started to pull some paper up with it. It's a very nice heavy weight cardstock, so it's hard to tell that it pulled up a little bit of paper. We'll add the sentiment right in the middle there, and it says, "Seize the day, make it amazing." Another beautiful card, and actually did not take very long to assemble that one at all. Oh, I forgot. We are going to add some gems. These are the Capri Blue and that matches the color scheme that I chose pretty darn well. And I'm just going to add a scattering. I love that there are 4 or 5 different sizes of gems. I like to create that graduating sizes across a card. It really adds a nice touch. And clearly I like to go from top left to bottom right corner. That seems to be my pattern. Now on to card number 5, we're going to use some Hero Hues reactive inks in Taffy, Creamsicle, and Lemon Drop. This is a really awesome color combo for sunsets, and that's definitely what I was going for here. I have a 4x7 piece of cardstock here, and I'm ink blending my freshly re-inked colors. Again, I'm so happy that I decided to re-ink all my ink pads, but I think I need to, like every quarter, re-ink about a quarter of my ink pads, because man, that was a really long process, and my fingers were dyed for days afterwards. No big deal. I don't mind that my fingers get inky, and I really like the way these reactive inks play. We're also going to use the Castaway Glimmer of the Month, and I do have to foil this twice. We are going to use the foil that was sent with this month, and that is the opal foil. You can see that beautiful iridescence with that. The tough part is remembering which side is the right side, or the shiny side, pretty side, because it's translucent. I did get it right though. I tend to take it off the roll, cut it, and then I just know that I'm going to keep it pretty side up until it's time to put it on the plate. And I just very roughly put a little pencil mark on the back of this cardstock so that I know where the edge of the plate had been on the first foiling. I'm using a dry brush. The opal foil does tend to do more overfoiling than the other colors, but it brushes right off with a dry paintbrush. It does tend to stick to my work surface though. No big deal. I mean, it's a work surface. It's not the finished project. I think that turned out gorgeous. We're also going to pull out an older 3D embossing folder. This is Bark. This is one of the Simon Hurley embossing folders. And I just really wanted that wood look. We're also going to use the Hero Hues reactive ink in Root Beer. And I have a scrap of heavyweight cardstock here. This is another scrap from trimming down my 5x7 card bases. And I'm using the root beer ink to create that brown. I wanted 2 tones of brown for my boat deck here. I ran both of these pieces through the embossing folder, and I had this beautiful deep embossing. And I have my stitched sailor's steering wheel here. I don't know what else to call that. And we will use, this is another quick tip. If you're trying to cut a small piece of cardstock, use another larger piece of cardstock to be your straight edge to slide it under your cutting blade. That works really slick. I trimmed these down to probably 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, and I'm lining these up on the edge of, on the bottom edge of this piece of cardstock that I've ink blended. Now, I barely have enough of the yellow showing on the finished card, but I made it work. I think I kept trimming down the brown cardstocks until I got a width that would work and still show some of that yellow on our sunset. Or sunrise. I guess that could be sunrise too, but it just says sunset to me. Very pretty. I really like how this turned out. Now I'll just line up the darker edge. I wanted this to look like the side of the boat where the top rail, that's the word. The top rail of the boat is a little bit darker than the body of the boat. I'm just using my paper trimmer here to trim off the excess. And I did have to trim a little bit of the lighter brown off of the bottom of the card to make this fit on my 3¼ by 6¼ inch panel that we're going to put on a 3½ by 6½ inch mini slimline card. Next, we're going to use a sentiment from the Ahoy Matey. We're going to use another of the, And we're going to add some extra layers of cardstock behind the steering wheel to make it flush. So I'm just using the edge of my pokey tool to roughly mark where the top of the rail lines up with the steering wheel here. And I do have 2 extra layers. Again, this is a really lightweight cardstock that I'm using. For the backer, this was, I think it was Hobby Lobby cardstock, craft cardstock. I've had that in my stash for a while. I don't really like how it feels and how it acts, so I use it more for backer and for organizational things. It does work well behind this colored cardstock, the craft cardstock, in order to create a little bit extra without having that white peeking out from behind my main image. Once I have these adhered, and I do have the stitching on the back to cover also, I am going to add a little glue to the back of this. And on the stitching part, I just put the glue on the stitched portions because that's all that will make contact with our project. I'm going to center this as best I can and line up the bottom edge of that steering wheel with the bottom edge of the panel. I'm using my grid mat here to try to center this as well as I can. Next, we'll adhere that to a matted portion, actually. I am just playing with this a bit. I think I did end up trimming that down to 6 by 3 instead of 6 1/4 by 3 1/4. And I trimmed this backer panel to 6 3/4 by 3 3/4. And then I'm using my distressing tool. That just felt right to have the distressed edges. So I'm just using this distressing tool, which I've had this one for probably 20 years. They do still sell them, and I'll try to link them in the description box below in case there are people out there watching my videos who don't have a distressing tool in their stash from, years gone by. I am trying to not be a hoarder, but let me tell you, crafty things are cyclical. They become popular in a cyclical fashion, and something will go out of fashion, and then it'll come back. And if you just hang on to it, if you've got the room, then you don't have to buy it again if you want to stay trendy. Just saying. I have mentioned before that I'm just working on my retirement plan by making sure I'm going to have a very well-stocked craft space for when I retire. I did add a little bit of ink, whatever was left on that sponge, to the edge to add a little extra definition. That was of the root beer ink. And we'll adhere this panel to the card. I did add a little extra cardstock behind the distressed edge piece. Next, we have the Anchors Away clear Stampin' Die. This is again heat embossed with gold embossing powder and die cut with the coordinating die. And I have an extra layer or 2. I think it's just 1 layer of cardstock. Then I'm playing with placement, but I really think centered above that steering wheel is the best way to place this. Now it's driving me nuts. I am certain that that steering wheel has another name when it comes to a ship. Let me pause and check that out. Okay, research says that it's generally called the helm. Maybe I'll remember. Next, we're using a sentiment from the Better Press of the Month, I think. Nope, this is from the Glimmer of the Month. And it says, I have to open the card to look, cast a net full of wishes. I'm using the Hero Hues inks in Taffy, Creamsicle, and Lemon Drop to add a little bit of inking to the inside of the card, again to bring the design from the front of the card to the inside, just using whatever was left on those brushes. I had foiled this sentiment on craft cardstock with the blush foil and die cut it with the coordinating die. And I'm using my T-square ruler here to try to make sure that I get this as even as I can. It may not be centered. I think it is though. Yep. And that finishes this card. I don't remember which card this is. Must have been 5. We are on to card number 6. We're going to start with that Castaway Glimmer of the Month again. And we're also going to use the Harbor Weave Better Press of the Month. And we're going to use these beautiful backgrounds to create a couple of cards. I'm using the 5x7 Matting Basics Set B again, and we're also going to use some rose gold assorted treasured cardstock. And I couldn't decide which color I was going to use. I'm also using the bark embossing folder again. I'm just going to trim off, this must be just the plain metallic rose gold. I'm going to trim off about a 1/2 inch segment. I thought this was long enough. Turned out it wasn't. I ended up doing this again, but that's okay. I have my matted die cut here of each of these. I layered both layers of background elements together, and I'm going to cut these together so that they will fit perfectly to make backgrounds for 2 different cards. So I'm just going to flip things around. It's kind of like color blocking, only it's pattern blocking. And we'll line these up, and we have 2 matted backgrounds for cards here. I'm going to use the metallic cardstock over the seam of these 2 patterns. And I decided to try this trick here. I'm going to use my Misty to corral these edges so that they're nice and even. Now, I was being a little too vigorous here, so it didn't quite work out as it should have, but don't put so much pressure on it. Just line them up. And I have scrap cardstock here to put behind these layers, which I do anyway. I mean, I like an extra piece of cardstock behind things to create some extra dimension and depth. And then I just lay that metallic embossed piece over the seam between these 2 patterns. And that creates an instant background. Turns out so slick. Just using my scissors here to trim off the overhang of the metallic piece. And we have 2 matted basics to create beautiful pieces with. This is set A. And I'm going to use that with some white cardstock, nautical knots, 3D embossing folder. And then I'm going to mat this with another of the 5x7 Matting Basics Set A, just a slightly larger one. Actually, I think it's 2 sizes larger. And I did cut out the center of that foiled paper because I don't want to waste it. You can't see it anyway. So I cut that out with another of those dies. And we're going to adhere this color blocked piece to the front of our 5x7 card base, and this is going to be a landscape instead of a portrait card. Using my Misties here for extra weight, we'll add glue to the back of this piece, which I think, yep, I did have extra cardstock scraps behind this very embossed piece. Just knocking off any of those paper hairs. After I have adhered this to our metallic frame, we're also going to use elements from the Sailor's Light large die of the month. Here we've got a couple of the buildings, the island, and 3 rocks. I'm adding some glue to the back of this matted piece, but before I adhere those, I added cardstock behind the corners that don't overlap the diagonal seam, just to add a little extra evenness here. Now we'll adhere our island, which is going to be where our buildings land. And before I let that completely adhere, I have the Castaway Glimmer of the Month sentiment, and this says throw your net wide this year, and we'll make sure that we have that placed, the island placed, so that we can have that sentiment underneath it. Next, we'll adhere our buildings, and these are going to be slightly off center, and that's okay, because as we assemble our images here, it'll keep it centered because the rocks are going to be part of that central image. I'm going to use all 3 of the rocks that we created, or boulders, adding these directly to the card base. And then for this last one, I did add some extra layers of cardstock behind it, just little tiny pieces to make it flush with the rocks as I adhered them, the previous 2 rocks. I added 1 layer of extra cardstock behind this thin sentiment strip, and I'm going to add that directly below our buildings. Next, I'm going to take a sentiment from the Fairways and Fishtails sentiment, and this was the extra, the Caboodles extra from, I think, March. I foiled those on some craft cardstock in the blush foil, and I'm using the one die that die cuts all of those sentiments at the same time. Going to add a little glue to that and adhere that to the inside of our card. Just using my reverse tweezers to get a good hold on those, and we'll just center that on the inside of the card. This says, "May your catches be legendary. Throw your net wide this year. May your catches be legendary." I think those really coordinated well. We're going to use those smoky topaz essential gems again. And I'm going from largest to smallest, radiating again from the left upper to the right lower corner. I don't know why that is my favorite way, but it is what looks the best to me most of the time. Creates some extra balance here, maybe because in this card it is a diagonal in the opposite direction that all of the other elements are going. I did throw a bunch more of those little tiny gems in between some of the other larger gems, and I really like how that turned out. On to card number 7. We're going to use that taffy creamsicle and lemon drop combo again. I've ink blended a half sheet of cardstock with that. And we're going to use the 5x7 Matting Basics Set A again to do both a craft cardstock and the ink blended cardstock layers here. I've chosen the layers I want, and I will add a little more of this taffy because I didn't have enough of it stay in the area I die cut. I should have started with a smaller piece of cardstock, but I didn't really know what I was going to do with it yet. So I've re-ink blended this area, and I'm going to come back with a little bit of orange and a little bit of yellow, trying to soften this blend. I really think this turned out great. It looks pretty sharply delineated here, but don't worry, it'll look much more blended in the long run. I'm going to distress these edges again. Now that I've pulled out the distressing tool, I just want to play with it more. And it really fits with the theme of this card also. I'm just adding some distressing to all of the edges, and I'm learning to just not push as hard and just slide it back and forth a few more times, and then you don't get quite as many crumples, unless the crumples are what you're looking for. It does not take very long, maybe a minute, to do all of the distressing all the way around. And of course, I have this at double speed and heavily edited. This video did take me probably 4 or 5 days of work to accomplish. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, I worked so hard on this video. I mean, I did, but that's not the point. The point is, I don't get this all done in one day. So if you feel like I craft super fast, not really. I'm probably the same as all of you. Each of my cards takes an hour or two to create, and that's appropriate. I mean, this is a leisure activity. This is something I do to relieve stress as a creative outlet. It is my happy space, so it should take time. I did ink the edges of that with root beer reactive ink again, and we're going to layer that up. Now, as I was dry fitting that, I did transfer some of that ink directly onto the background, so be a little careful there. I decided I needed to go back a little bit to my roots, and I did some actual sewing on this panel. I just did a wide, long zigzag stitch on here, and I have one sewing machine that isn't good for much other than sewing on paper anymore. I had to replace it with a different sewing machine, so I may as well use that one for stitching on paper. We're going to do some spatter again here with the Yasamoto Spellbinders and Yasamoto watercoloring mix again. This is the pearlized color, and then I'm also going to use the white spatter. Now, I picked up some cute little dishes while I was in San Francisco visiting family, and this green little bowl is one of them, and I think this is going to be my white spatter bowl. It is perfect, and you can reconstitute this white spatter in your bowl by just adding a little water to it and swirling it again. So perfect. I did add some extra cardstock behind this layer, of course. When don't I? It's very rare that I don't add extra cardstock behind my layers. I'm going to center this in my distressed piece. And I don't think I let that dry quite long enough because I think I smeared a couple of those spatters. Oh, maybe not. I'm looking on the finished project and no, it doesn't look too bad. I did use another mailer here. It was in my recycling bin in my craft room and I pulled it out because it was a good size to go behind this piece that I had pattern blocked. I needed a larger piece. It was nice to have that. We're going to adhere our stitched, ink blended, and distressed edged panel to the front of the card. And you can see that I switched the orientation of the dark versus light color blocking for this so that the dark part is on top. This is going to be another landscape card. We're going to use the Sailor's Light, the lighthouse from that. And we're going to use the rocks from the Guiding Light die set. This is from last year or the year before. This is from the Fair Winds collection. I don't know. I don't think this die set's available on the Spellbinders site, but if it's available elsewhere, I will link it in the description box or in the list, the product list for you. It might be available elsewhere, and if you go to Spellbinders and click on the Notify Me button, that'll let them know that more people want it. It is a very wonderful set. I love the whole Fair Winds collection. I think other people have featured it with these dies also, or with this club's collection. And if you have it in your stash, pull it out, man. I'm using that root beer reactive ink again to add some color to these rocks. I'm going lighter on the background piece and darker on the top piece. And you could do it in the opposite too. I'm also using this root beer ink blended craft cardstock to die cut some of these silhouette seagulls from the Fair Winds collection. And I'm going to use those on the front of this card. I'm adding a little bit of glue to these detail portions for these giant cliffs or boulders. You really could go with gray too, but I was feeling the brown, just feeling the brown. I think it still goes okay with the lighthouse. Sometimes when you're mixing neutrals, using grays or cool tones for mechanical or man-made things, and browns or warm brown neutrals goes well with the natural elements. And that's kind of the theory I was going with on this particular project. Now that I have our cliffs or boulders assembled, let's lay them on our card front. I was initially going to trim off the excess beyond the borders of this matted center piece, but I decided to let that one overhang. I liked how that looked. So we'll just let her be. I did add a little bit of extra cardstock at the point of this second group of rocks or cliff to make that nice and even. And then we'll adhere our lighthouse. I do have to be careful to make sure that the edge of the lighthouse is right up to the edge of that larger or taller boulder. I added some extra cardstock behind that to make sure that it is nice and even across the front of the card. And then it's time to add these seagulls. I'm not going to add any gems to this card. These are kind of my embellishments or my gems on this card front. So I'm adding a lovely scattering of seagulls around the lighthouse. I think these are sized really quite nicely for the buildings in the large die of the month for this month. This is the Fair Winds Sentiment. So it's another stamp and die set here. And we're going to take a sentiment and stamp this directly on the card front. This is pretty risky. However, it does have a coordinating die, so if I messed it up, I could always stamp it again on a similarly ink blended panel and die cut it and adhere it to the front of the card, or just do it in white. But I liked how it just kind of blended in or was part of the background. I'm using my Stamp Wheel 2.0 with its wonderful side that pulls off, so it's an open-sided stamping platform. And using VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink here to stamp our sentiment directly on the background. This works really well when you're stamping directly on a card front because you can restamp as needed. I'm also taking an inside sentiment from that same Fair Winds sentiment stamp and die set. This one doesn't have a coordinating die, but that's okay. And we'll add a seagull to the inside. This says, may the seas lie smooth before you. May a gentle breeze forever fill your sails. May sunshine warm your face and kindness warm your soul. I think that is a wonderful sentiment, and it works for several occasions. Next, we're going to do two cards that are similar. So this is cards 8A and B. I have the Rolling Tides embossing, stencil of the month. And this is a paste called Midnight Pearl from Cosmic Shimmer. This is a lunar paste from them. Luna paste. And look, Spellbinders has a metal spatula. Love these. These are great when you're doing my two-tone wax seal techniques, which, by the way, I did not get the wax seal this month. That's why you didn't see it in my video. If I don't have it, I can't use it. When I have it, I will use it. But I use that beautiful palette knife to do my paste through the stencil. I waited for that paste to dry. Actually, I used my heat tool because I am not very patient. And then laid the stencil down again. I'm not worrying about matching this up. It is not a repeating pattern, but with everything that we have going on with the cards that I'm making, you're not going to be able to see that seam, and it won't be a distracting feature. Look at that. Oh, I love how that paste turned out. Now I do make sure to clean up my tools right away with that paste so it doesn't cause any problems in the long run. Now this time I am going to use the same technique, only I'm going to use Distress Spritz in antique linen and spritz that over the stencil to get our background. Now the second time I did this, you don't really have to wait for dry time on this in this version. Just have to be careful when you do your placement. I did dab a little bit of the extra Distress Spritz off of the stencil before I laid it down again, but I forgot to use my acetate sheet here to cover the side I didn't want to stencil yet. But you know what? We're going to go with it. We're going to cover most of this panel anyway with other elements, so it's okay. This is just creating a background. Now to clean my surface, I just spritz it with my soapy water and use my microfiber cloth to clean that up. Now I store my 9x12 sticky mat on the outside of one of these envelopes. It works great. I know other people put them inside, but that just seems like more work. I don't need to do that. We're going to use dies from the Sailor's Light set again, and I cut these mountains or hills from a rainbow of colors. Now that first mountain or hill looks like it's peach colored. It's pink. I don't know why it looks peach in this lighting, but it is. This is this sentiment set and the next one, Sparkle On sentiment, and the let's see, what's this one? Shine Bright sentiment strips. Those are from the Shine Bright collection from Carissa Wiley. That came out last year. These dies are from the Kindred Stamps. This is the Pride layered die set. This is definitely going to be a Pride card. I die cut the glitter from the Antique Assorted pack. And the first sentiment set was the Holding Your Heart sentiments from the Dina Wakley collection from last month. And it fits perfectly with this theme. I'm going to adhere this panel to a 6.5 by 3.5 inch mini slimline card. I cut this down to 3.25 by 6.25 inches. I'm going to use my T-square ruler to help line up these mountains on the front of the card, and we're going to use 7 mountains on each of these cards in order to get all of those wonderful colors. On this one, we're using 4 of the larger mountains and 3 of the smaller. And I'm just trying to center these fairly evenly across the front of the card, using my T-square ruler to create the edge because these are not lined up with the bottom of that matted panel. I needed a way for that Pride sentiment to hang below. We're going to add the snow caps here, and I die cut some of them from white cardstock and some from that antique assortment glitter cardstock, which is like a white mix. And I just alternate those caps across the front of the card. Next, we're going to add the smaller of the mountains. This particular red was actually cardstock that I ink blended with excess ink from when I was re-inking my ink pads. So the back of that one is white. The rest of these are cut from textured cardstocks that I think I got from Tonic Studio. I just was looking for a fun and easy rainbow, so I need to use some of my stash. I really do need to start breaking into my specialty cardstocks, and I wasn't finding the rainbow blend that I wanted in my scraps. So here we go. This is the rainbow of Tonic textured cardstock that I had. I like the texture. Sometimes you just want a little texture without having to do any embossing. Again, adding snow caps in white and glitter cardstock on the tops of these little mountains. Now that all of those are assembled, it's time to add our sentiment. We've got the large pride. I have sandwiched, so there's a glitter layer, a white cardstock layer, a vellum shadow layer, and then another layer of white cardstock behind the vellum. And that adds that floaty look behind that vellum. And we'll adhere that to our card front. And I like how that just tucks along the bottom edge of the mountains here. I took a sentiment from the Holding Your Heart sentiment better press plates that I glimmered with silver foil on white cardstock. And I had glimmered the More Glitter, Less Bitter sentiment from the Shine Bright collection in silver on white cardstock and die cut that with the coordinating cardstock or coordinating die. Now we're going to use that Rolling Tides stencil to add this design to the inside of the card, kind of like it's blowing out of the sentiment. And I'm using antique linen, which coordinates with the Distress Spritz. We're going to use the Crystal Mix Color Essential Gems to add just 3 gems under the sentiment. I know, I can't believe I restrained myself to just 3 gems on the front of this card. Don't worry, I'll make up for it on the next one. So that is card 8A complete. This is card 8B. This is with that moonlit path or the very sparkly paste that I used. There's, of course, some extra cardstock behind this layer, and we'll adhere that directly to my mini slimline card base here, which is 3.5 by 6.5 inches. Using my heavyweight block to add a little extra weight on there to make sure it adheres nicely. And I'm just going to speed through the assembly of this card, starting with the center large mountain, because there's 3 mountains on this one. And we are lining these all up with the bottom edge of this panel. So we've got our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And then we've got our orange. Nope. Yeah, that one's the orange one. This one's green. And then we'll add the purple on the end. And I'm lining that up with the bottom corner of the panel. And the same with the pink, which again looks very peach, but in real life looks very pink. Sometimes photography's funny. I had laid these designs out and picked them up with press and seal just to make sure that my vision was completed roughly how I'd planned it. I did not plan for the fact that this mountain needed to come up a little bit so I could get the mountaintop, the snow cap, on top of the red mountain. It all worked out though. Now I'm trying to figure out where the best place to put this sentiment is, and I decide right front and center. It says sparkle on, my friend, and I had 2 extra layers of cardstock behind the sentiment, again making sure that it stands out nicely on this very bold and very busy card. I think this turned out so cute, to be honest. These really, they tickled my rainbow happiness. Now that I have the sentiment on there, we are going to do a little ink blending on the inside. Again, I am using inks that you may not even be able to get a hold of anymore. Whenever I buy an ink pad, I for sure get at least 1 refill. And this is an old style Stampin' Up! ink pad, but it's whatever you have in your stash that you can use. You can even spritz it again. This is the Illuminate. It's just kind of a frosty ink pad, and I bet that there is a Lisa Horton interference ink that you could use for this. I just don't have any light colors in that. Next, I have adhered a sentiment strip from that Better Press from the Shine Bright. That is a really fun Better Press sentiment set. The world needs more of you. We're going to take the Crystal Mix Color Essential Gems again, and I'm going to add a few more of these in the kind of cloudy version of these gems. I did finally finish one sheet of those, and that completes 8B, card 8B. On to card number 9. We're going to use the Sailor's Light again. We're going to make some really cute layered clouds here. I have some Stickles glitter gel here in Asteroid, and I had just refreshed those by adding water and stirring them up again. And then I decided to play with them. I just smeared some of these gels on cardstock and let them dry. This is the Brutus Monroe Glitter Glaze in Galaxy and Unicorn Horn, and we had Asteroid and Nebula for the Stickles glitter gel. Very similar products, and they are so fun to work with. Oh my gosh, I encourage you to smear them on some cardstock, let them dry, and do some die cutting. We're also going to use the Treasured cardstocks in Silver and Antique, and I die cut the glossy white and the metallic white. I think they called the white one metallic white also, but it's a high white gloss cardstock, or very slightly off white. I don't actually use the white versions on this card. I just use the silver versions, but that's okay. This is how I assemble those, just little dots of glue and glue around the perimeter, and then adhere that to the solid base. And these turned out so cool. I can't stop staring at them. They're so pretty. Oh my gosh. Next, we're going to use the Shipmates Die of the Month, the little seagull from that one. I die cut that from some pearlized white cardstock from the Treasured cardstock pack, and some silver from the Silver Assorted, just the pearlized cardstock for the wingtips. And I'm just using some orange cardstock for the beak and feet. I've already showed you how to assemble that, decided not to do that again. We're going to use the ink blended panel from the stencil of the month, and a sentiment from the Stamp and Die of the month. We're going to pull out an Action Wobbler. This is the small version, and you can purchase these in the Spellbinders shop. Just going to peel the backer off of one side of this Action Wobbler using my pokey tool because my nails just won't do it. And this particular one lines up just perfectly behind our little seagull. I do end up trimming a little bit off of it for the piece that adheres to the card, just so you can't see it when you're doing your wobbling. We're also going to use the Emerald Cut Labels and Tag die set. I love the detail on the larger, or on the I love the detail on these dies. So I use the largest one to create a shaped card front. And there are layering pieces in this die set, so you can cut a layer that doesn't have the etch detail in the outer edge. And I will use those details on the outer edge to determine where we're going to score this for our shaped card design. I'm using my scoreboard here to just add a nice deep crease for the back. This is the inside panel of the card. We'll add a little glue above that score line and adhere these two pieces together, and we have an instant shaped card. I love how easy that is to create. And sometimes it really is just as a simple matter of taking a large die and cutting it twice, adding a crease line to the inside panel, and gluing those pieces together to have a really nice shaped card. And you can't see the crease line from the front of the card. Now I do have a piece of pearlized cardstock, white cardstock here. I do still have some brushed cardstock left in white. So this is the same color as the white pearlized paper in the Treasured cardstock pack. So there you go. You are still going to be able to get that color. I adhere that to the front of the card, and we have that lovely stenciled stencil of the month rolling tides. And we have our cute little seagull. I'm going to trim a little bit of the piece that adheres to the actual card front so that you don't see the wobbler when you wobble your seagull. Action wobblers are really easy to add to a card, and they are really fun. They add a really easy action element to your card. And I'm telling you, everyone loves a card that moves. And this flattens really nicely to go in an envelope. I probably shouldn't have squished that down so much. You can see a little bit of the indentation of the action wobbler on my finished card, but I'm okay with that. I am sitting here playing with the wobbler right now. I did add a little bit of extra cardstock on one side of this cloud to make it lay nice and even. I have 2 extra layers of cardstock behind this ahoy. This was stamped and heat embossed, stamped with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and heat embossed with clear embossing powder, die cut with the coordinating die, and then layered to create a hefty sentiment to go on the front of your card. Now the inside of the card, I have another of those seagulls that I cut with the same papers and assembled in the same way, except I put the long legs on him. And then I have a sentiment that is stamped, embossed, clear embossed, and die cut with the narrow sentiment die from, is that from the, I think that's from the Glimmer of the Month, that die, and we'll adhere those to the inside of the card. And that completes card number 9. Isn't he cute? Card number 10. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're going to create a stand-up card here. This is 5 by 8.5 inches, scored at, well, I showed you on the Post-it note. I scored it at 5 inches and 7 inches, and it's a 5 by 8.5 inch piece of cardstock. Now I'm cutting off one section, or actually everything but the large section here. And I used that trimmer that you can just drop the blade in a specific spot on the paper. Can't do that with a guillotine. This is a 2.5 by 8.5 inch piece of cardstock, again scored at 5 and 7 inches. Now this will fold down into a 5 by 7 envelope. That's why I chose the sizing that I chose. I left these tabs nice and long just because it creates extra stability, and you know, it's an 8.5 inch piece of cardstock. I may as well use the whole thing. I'm just going to adhere the front panel of this box card. And these are going to be the little bridges or shelves on the inside of the card for you to add your critters or your elements to your card. This style of card has been around for a long time, so this may not be a new concept to you. There are die sets for different sizes and different shapes of this particular kind of card, but you can do this without any special equipment. And that's what we're doing today. I am going to adhere one end of these bridges on the side panel of the box card on one side, and we'll do the side that's already been attached to the front. I did the frontmost and the backmost one first, and then added the center one. These are 1 inch by 6 inches, scored at a 1/2 inch and 5.5 inches. And these will lay nicely in there. I did trim a little bit off the furthermost back one so it wouldn't interfere with the folding. Now I really should have just adhered these to the side panel before I went on to the next step, but this is what I did. Now it's time to, well, I'm going to show you the panels that I created for the sides. This is 2 1/4 by 3 3/4, and this one's 1 3/4 by 2 1/4, and we're going to need 2 of these for the side panels. And that's a quick way to do the decorative portions. This is for the back, both sides of it, 4 3/4 by 4 3/4, because this is 5 by 5 inches, this back piece. And that will, you'll want to tuck that flap, behind the decorative panel. I did use the Better Press of the Month, the Harbor Weave. Now this is the piece that I did on the watercolor cardstock with the, I think that was VersaFine Clair ink that I used in like Acorn or Fallen Leaves or something. It was a dark brown. And now it's time to adhere that inside flap, and I added glue to each of these. This is why I should have adhered those to that side panel earlier, but this works. Added glue to those flaps and glued them to the side panel. And I'm just folding this back and forth several times to make sure that everything is moving as it should. We'll add some glue to the back of this, and I think I did trim that down to 4.5 inches wide. And it doesn't actually make it all the way down to the bottom, so it doesn't have to be 4.5 inches long, but just most of the way down behind those bridges. Just sealing that down nice and tight. Then it's time to, I think I did the side panels next. I'm using the Mariner's Weave embossing folder to add some detail to these panels that we're going to glue to the sides of the box here. Now that I've got those embossed, I'm going to use some Distress ink in antique linen. That seems to be the best match to this Distress Oxide, or sorry, not Distress Oxide, Desert Storm craft cardstock. It looks darker than it will look ultimately here. This will dry back to a little bit lighter. I also added a little bit of ink to the edges, hoping that would add a little bit of distressing to the edges, and I ultimately decided to use my distressing tool again because, like I said, once I have it out, I want to play with it. So I distressed the edges of all four edges of each of these panels that we're going to adhere to the box card. Almost have that finished. One more side. If you've got one of those distressing tools, hey, leave me a comment below. Say, hey, yeah, I've got one. Do you use it? When's the last time you pulled it out? Do you miss it if you don't use it often? Or are you glad to be done with that phase of your crafting? It does make a bit of a mess, but it doesn't bother me at all. Just going to adhere that to the front of the card. And somehow I magically centered that piece pretty well on the pattern so that there is a diamond right in the center. And one of the side panels. The other side panel I didn't center so well on the embossed design, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to center those in each of the panels. Not only is this a nice decorative element, but it adds a little more sturdiness to your box card. Now I have all kinds of critters. We've got the Ahoy Matey, the Stitch and Die of the Month, with the seagulls and the helm. And then the Festive Friends from October 24 with a polar bear and penguin. And then we have the Die of the Month this month, the Shipmates with the walrus and another seagull. And there are a variety of accessories to go with these. Now for the polar bear's sweater, I'm using the Nautical Knots, and you can see how this kind of looks like a cable knit on here. I have some blue cardstock that I've die cut his sweater from and did the embossing on. I added an extra piece of cardstock behind the neckline of the sweater. Now I'm wishing I had used a blue cardstock, but it works in the long run. I did not poke out all of those lines that were die cut out of the neckline. I left those in place. So it continues the color through the whole thing. Just going to line that up on the top of his sweater. And then I will add a line of glue along the top edge of this sweater and glue it to the head of our polar bear. I did most of the critter assembly off screen. It would have taken so much longer if I'd done this. I got the vision of this card when I woke up this morning. I just knew exactly what I wanted to do. And here we are. But it took me this card probably took me 3 hours to make because I had all those critters to assemble and then thinking about how to create the box card. And then just a box card takes a little longer. But man, I think it was so worth it. And I used almost every single club kit component on this card. Now this is the jacket for your walrus. If you cut a second layer and then flip it upside down, it works to add a shadow layer behind the jacket. So you have like a second color peeking around one edge, and it also colors the buttons for your jacket a different color. And I wanted black buttons on this, so here we are. Very easy. And I like that little bit of the inside of the jacket peeking through with another color behind it. And of course, it makes it a little extra sturdy. There's our jacket, and we'll assemble that. Now, I did not put the tusks on the walrus this time, so maybe it's a seal this time. And that works too. We'll just add the jacket, making sure you're lining the collar up with the edge of the body on the side and the bottom of the jacket with the bottom of the walrus. Now, it wouldn't matter as much on this fella because you're going to tuck him inside this box card, but there you go. We've got a little toque on him, and I did use the different accessories across. I didn't stick to one die set for the accessories. These are all sized to work together. It is so cute. I love when past club kits coordinate with current ones. Now just trying to figure out where I want to put all of the critters. I did put the helm on the back, and you don't see much of it unless you're tilting the card in your hand. It does add a fun element, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be center of the stage. It's just adding to the scene that we're building. I add some glue to the back of each of these characters and add them to the different bridges or shelves on the inside of the card. I'm just building this as we go. I did find that I had to trim a little bit away from our walrus on the inside once I'd glued him because I glued him a little too close to the fold edge. Just using my finger to push it up enough to get my scissor in there and trim off the extra. Now it's time to add the largest of the seagull, and he is going to be the captain apparently because I put a captain's hat on him. It actually doesn't really, that captain's hat doesn't work so well on any of the other critters unless, yeah, I guess they could wear their hat sideways. Why not? I just liked it on the seagull. Then we have our cute little penguins. We're going to center one of these guys up in the center of the box card. And we're going to use the smaller seagull on the other side here. And I am trying to fit as many of these critters on this card as I can. One of the sentiments from the Clear Stampin' Die of the month is from the crew. So I wanted to make this look like a really busy crew of sailors. We've got our penguin hanging out at the top edge. And now we'll add another seagull and another penguin to the front of the card. Just looking for placement here, just trying it out. Nice triangular pattern to this on the front of the card. Once I get my placement figured out, I'll add some glue to these fellas. I had so much fun assembling these guys. Yeah. And actually, to be honest, the colors that I used for these are mostly when I was re-inking all of my ink pads. Some of them I got a little too inky, and so I was using I was ink blending onto some scraps of cardstock. And so I had this pile of cardstock scraps. And I think it's Uncharted Mariner and not Broken China. What is this? Tumbled Glass. That's what it is, that light blue. And the red, I think, is Candied Apple, and the green is Forest. Something. Rustic Forest. Rustic Wilderness. There we go. Yes. So for the back panel, this is still 4 3/4 by 4 3/4. I did a little bit of partial embossing with that rope design, the 3D embossing folder, nautical knots, and I used the antique linen to add some color to the raised portion, blocking off the portion that I wasn't going to ink blend with my piece of acetate. We have several sentiments from the Clear Stampin' Die. We've got Ahoy Matey, Anchors Away to an Amazing Birthday from the Crew, and Party Like a Sea Captain, Happy Birthday. I'm adding extra layers, I think 2 layers behind the Anchors Away sentiment. And we'll adhere that underneath that top penguin. And then we'll take an extra layer, one extra layer behind from the crew, and add that below between the penguin and the seagull on the bottom of the front of the card. And then we're going to take the Ahoy Matey and put one extra layer of cardstock behind that. And we'll glue that in the, where do I put that? Upper right corner. This is a very full box. There are so many awesome elements in this. I can't stop looking at this. Huh. Do you feel that way about your cards sometimes? Yep. Now that I have that adhered, we'll finish the design for the back of the card. This is the spot where you can add a personal message. We're going to add the sentiment, "Party like a sea captain, happy birthday," to the back of this after we adhere this to the back of the card. So these extra layers are, again, adding extra stability for your card. This is a very sturdy card, and when it lays flat, it is 5x7 shaped or sized. So it'll fit in a 5x7 card. Sorry, envelope. It'll fit in a 5x7 envelope. So if you want to mail this, it would probably take extra postage because there are a lot of elements here and it's not flat. There's some extra bulk in the middle of the card, but that's okay. I adhered our toque and scarf wearing seagull to the back along with that sentiment, and then you have a completed card. That is all 10 of the cards that I created today. Well, actually 11, but today in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really had a lot of fun. There's only one card that I was not as impressed with, and that was this card, the one on the right. That was not my favorite card. Let me know which one is your favorite. Leave me a comment below. I would love to hear anything you have to say about my video today. If you haven't subscribed, now is a great time to do that. If you're interested in any of the products I used today, check that description box below. There will be a list to the complete product list down there. Until next time, here are a couple more videos I thought you might enjoy. Bye-bye.